Now let me take you back to the time of the Georgian Navy, under the command of George Anson. Anson was First Lord of the Admiralty in 1751. So we're looking at the mid-18th century. Now I hope to demonstrate to you that Anson tried to create an air of invincibility in the Navy. And to achieve this, you had to have an efficient and effective gunnery system. And I believe the wreck of Invincible is providing the archaeological evidence for this. Now imagine you're a ship's captain in 1747 and you're standing on the poop deck of your ship, looking through your telescope, and you see the ship before you. You couldn't help but be impressed. For this ship is at the height of technology of ship design. It's a new type of warship, a 74-gun ship. It carries its main armament on 2 gun decks, so it has a very powerful broadside. Now this is exactly what Anson saw when he captured Invincible at the First Battle of Cape Finisterre in 1747. Except he didn't see the Japs, of course, he saw the tricolor. But he immediately recognised that this was the future of British warship design. Now change doesn't happen overnight, but we will see that eventually Anson would have his way and he designed the fleet, the British fleet, around these 74s. Now let's have a look at, briefly have a look at the ships that he wanted to get rid of and replace with the 74s. We had this obsession in the 1730s, 1740s, producing 3-deckers. And we built some terrible ships, designed some terrible ships, including these 80-gun 3-deckers. The problem with these were they were very top-heavy for their size. Gave them poor sailing qualities. These are not the attributes for a stable, mobile gun platform. Now let's compare that with a 74-gun ship. Much longer. What the ship designers were doing, they're stretching these ships out, allowing them to carry bigger guns lower down. And that obviously increases the stability, but also gives it a heavier broadside. And what the British did was develop these 74s to be able to stay at sea for prolonged periods of time. They had large holds that you could carry provisions and stores for being away for a long time. And we built them strong because we like to fight and engage the enemy. So let's move on to 1758. This is the period of the 7 Years' War. Invincible is at anchor with the fleet off the east coast of the Isle of Wight. And the fleet are getting ready to sail across the Atlantic to North America to oust the French from a fortress called Louisburg. So Invincible is doing exactly what she was designed to do, go and fight in far-flung places. Unfortunately, as many of you know who have died with me, Invincible didn't get very far. A series of calamitous events led her to running aground on a sandbank just outside here in Portsmouth. Now, the weather wasn't particularly bad, shallow ground, so no one drowned, everyone got off, and the ship remained above the water for a number of weeks and even months, and in that time they got all the guns off. Now you may ask yourself, or some of you may be asking, why is he up there talking at the Ordnance conference about a ship that has no guns left? Well, as we know from Alex Hildred's work on the Mary Rose, the guns are only one part of an intricate array of equipment, tools, and ammunition that make up the naval gunnery system. And it's the equipment and where you find it on the ship, its organisation, that tells you about the people that administer the naval gunnery system and the people that operated the naval gunnery system. And it's the people, as archaeologists, it's the people that we're interested in. So let's have a look at the site. Now, I've got to say, right from this point on, 40 years investigation has gone on the site, and John Biggerman is in the audience here, and he started it off with his team with Arthur Mack in 1979. And they found, well, what we have here is a plan of the site. I've had to rotate the image so it fits on the screen. But the line drawings of what John did in the 1980s Down here we've got some drawings that we did with the NAS about 10 years ago. And the rest of it is a photogrammetry of the areas that we excavated in the last 3 years. So what we have is, the port side is pretty much the one coherent piece from the stern to the bow, from the main gun deck down to close to the floor of the ship. The starboard side is all out here, and it's completely broken off and lies to the north. And then we have the bottom of the ship around the midships where the shot lockers are. So let's look at the parts of the ship that are related to gunnery. And let's start off in the stern, where we have a lovely section of the port quarter that survives and the gun ports. And then my favourite part is in the bow, where you have all the stores of the ship, all the gunnery stores and the gunpowder. And then here amidships, we've got the shot lockers. So if we move to the stern, this is taken from the photogrammetry, it's a depth elevation model. It stands out more, that's why I put it in this format. And what we have up here are the remains of the main 2 gun ports on the port aft quarter. And what we're seeing here is the evidence, although the guns are gone, we're still seeing the evidence how these guns would have been secured to the ship. So you can see on either side of the gun port we've got these large concretions. And we've got at least 2, on each side, 2 ring bolts. Here you can see what's left of the ring bolts. Now the lower one will probably attach the breaching rope, and on a British warship the breaching rope would go around the back of the gun. We've seen from other talks that French carriages, the breaching would go through the carriage rather than the back of the gun. The upper ring, that's where you attach your gun tackle. So this is essential for manoeuvring your gun, especially when you want to run it out to fire. So moving quickly on, let's go to the bow of the ship, and this is where we start learning about maintaining the gunnery system and keeping it in supply of spare equipment. We're going to look at the stowage of gunpowder in the magazine and how they transported that gunpowder from the magazine up to the gun decks. So here's another depth elevation model of the bow. The area we're looking at is from the gun deck, the first 3 gun stations down through to the bottom of the ship to the oil and the hold. And this, I want to look at particularly areas of the gunner's store. And this, John excavated this with his team in the 80s and found a wonderful array of gunnery equipment. And here, the top image here is a plan of the Valiant, which was launched in 1759, which Anson based on the line of Invincible. That's probably the closest we have of the internal arrangements of Invincible. We also have here the remains of the light room. The light room is essential for shining light into the magazine because you're deep in the hold. Into the filling room, which is just about there, and then you've got the main magazine behind it. So let's start with the orlop deck and then we'll work down. And this is what John excavated and found all these wonderful pieces of equipment. We were also finding similar material in the last few years. But you've got your spare rammers, sponges, blocks, etc. So let's have a look at some of those pieces of equipment. And here we have a rammer head. All of this is equipment that hasn't been used, there's no wear on it, it's all perfectly turned. Each rammer has got the size of the gun that it was intended for. So we've got, on Invincible at this time, we've got 9-pounders, 24-pounders and 32-pounders. Everything's perfectly made. We've got the sponges that go with that, and the sheepskin would go around the sponge cylinder. Now, these are spare equipment, and these would have either been used, as you see on Victory here, either for your flexible rammers with sponges, or rammers that were on solid stays. Now we know from gunners' inventories that every ship was issued, every gun was issued with a flexible rammer and sponge, and they shared ones on a solid stock between several other guns. So these would be the ones that they would use when they're fighting. It enables you to load the gun within the safety of the ship, rather than sticking parts of your body out through the gun port because you've got a long staff. All of that, those rammers are all the same, perfectly made, because all the guns are standardised at this stage. So all the gun decks, got the same guns. It's not a mixture like we see on the London. So there's no alterations made to this kit. Here are examples of quoins and stall beds. These pieces of equipment will be used to support the breech end of the gun. And again, they're all perfectly made, they're brand new, they haven't been used, got perfectly chamfered edges. There's a stall bed at the top, and these are the quoins that will sit on the stall bed. That's a 9-pounder quoin, and that's a 32-pounder. We know because it's all written, engraved on the wood. Next we have single 10-inch blocks and double 10-inch blocks, and these were the spare gun tackle. Gun tackle was essential for running the guns out, manoeuvring the guns, because it's extremely heavy. And you see here on Victory, double block goes in the front, and the single block near the rear of the carriage. You'd also have gun tackle for the train tackle that would connect to the rear of the carriage too. Tampions. Tampions were essential for keeping the barrel of your gun dry and clean. When you're not using the gun, you don't want it to get, your gunpowder to get damp, because you don't want to have a misfire when you really need it. So essential for that was tampion, plugging the end of the gun. They cut the spare ones come in spools, so when you need one, you just cut one of the tampions off the edge, off the end. These are 9-pounder ones, so the smallest ones. So let's move on now to, we're going to go down into the ship, into this area, which is a forward store. And from the archaeological evidence on Invincible, this store actually extends around the sides of the light room. And this is what we found, sort of port side of the light room, an absolute mountain of gun wads. And if you come around the display cabinet, you would have seen some of these. I actually have one here. It's basically a ball of yarn from old rope. And they're essential in the loading process. They were kept in string bags. Each string bag had a tally stick, either with Roman numerals 32 or 24. It's difficult to tell the difference between a 32 and 24-pounder gun wad. The 9-pounder gun wads are much smaller, you can tell the difference, and their tally sticks have nothing on them. Now, this is the area I'm talking about. So, this pine panelling here is the corner of the light room, and this is the side of the light room, so in the wings of the bow, and this is the orlop deck here where the gunner store was. So we're calling this the wadding store, and it's a very cramped, tight space, and it goes in underneath the deck. So I was saying these wads are essential in the loading and the firing of the guns. You couldn't fire successfully without them. The first wad goes in front of the charge, and this is to create a seal to stop excess gases escaping around the shot, reducing the power of your shot. The next wad goes in front of the shot, and if you're on a moving ship rolling about, that cannonball is going to want to roll out the barrel of the gun, so you've got to stop that by ramming down another gun wad. You also find gun wads attached to the tampion, so when you're not using it, it's soaking up any moisture that may be in the barrel. So, peeling back the layers, we recovered all of those gun wads, absolutely hundreds of them, and then underneath we found all of this old rope. It's all cable laid, it was all different sizes, we had served rope, we even had old shrouds with knots on. And this is what we believe is junk. Junk is old ropes, and when you've used up all of your wads that were made, you're going to need to make some more. So the sailors, or the gunners' mates, will be there picking the yarns from the old rope to make more gun wads. What it shows is the fact that we've got hundreds of these is the master gunner on board, very efficient and organised. He's made sure that the ship is ready to fight as soon as she leaves port, because he's got hundreds of gun wads ready to use if they need to engage the enemy. And this is all of that rope once we've recovered all the junk too. A 70-foot gun ship like Invincible would carry nearly 7 tons on foreign service. So that is a lot of junk. Peeling back the layers even more, we removed all of that junk, and then we started finding more guns stores in the form of spare gun carriage axles. Now these were stored, stacked neatly between two breast hooks, so right at the bow of the forepeak. Again, so they're utilising every bit of space on board this ship. They're cramming in as much storage as they possibly can. We found 8 of these, and they were going to be used on the spare for the 9 pounds 24s and 32s. We know this because they're all marked again. Here's an example here. Not only does it have the gun type, it also has whether it's going to be a forward axle or a rear axle. But here you can see H is behind, that's your rear axle. At this time, we've got away with the carriage with a solid bed, and we're just using these larger sort of transom axles. Actually, I was going to say, they're perfectly made. They can be directly swapped out for a defective one. All you would have to do would cut some notches in so the cheeks could slot into, and drill a hole for a linch pin to stop the truck wheel falling off. Another example of utilising the space, and actually using space that you wouldn't expect. In the corner of the light room, we found these objects, these wedge-like objects, neatly stacked. See, there's one there, there's another one there. They have like this one corner cut out. These haven't got any markings, so I've asked a number of you what you think, but I've come up with a working hypothesis. I don't know if it is, but I'll run it by you. Here they are, so you can see them close up. They've got 2 fastening holes, and they've got one cut out, but they're wedge-shaped, so they are coin-like. Now, all of the gunner stores that go on, there's an inventory. So there's a list, and the master gunner has to sign these in and sign them out. So we have very comprehensive lists. So if they are gun equipment, they're going to be on the list. So let's have a look at the gunner store for a 74. Now when the guns go on with the carriages, each carriage is issued with 1 bed and 1 coin. And we know those coins and beds are gone. They were taken off. The ship will then be issued with a number of spare ones, but we've only got a small number. So we're not expecting to need too many of these. But this is the interesting bit. If we look down at the bottom line, we've got coins for coining guns of the new pattern. And it's got 64. So it's 64 of these type of coins, and the fact that there's 64 of them means that they can be shared between all of the guns, so it doesn't have to go with a specific size. So that may be why we've got the sub coin that doesn't have the size of gun on it, because it can go with all of them. So that's just a working hypothesis. So let's just recap the gunner's store. Well, most of you know they'll be on the orlop deck, which we have. But if you look at this plan on the valiant, there's a hatch in the starboard side of the orlop deck. And the archaeological evidence from Invincible is showing that this leads down to the forepeak underneath, which they're also using to store gunner stores. So again, utilising all the space on board, because they're going to be fighting a long way away from home. And the fact that they're all clearly labelled and organised in certain areas of the ship is showing a high level of organisation. So we've got, very professional at this time, organised, professional, and disciplined. Moving on, we're going to go aft from the light room, and we're going to look into the forward magazine. Now, as you can see, it's completely empty. It's empty because John Bingaman had recovered nearly 48 barrels of gunpowder from there in the 1980s, and also recovered the filling room. But you can see, this is one of John's pictures from his team. You can see the gunpowder barrels stacked up. They would have been stacked up along here. If we look at this lovely drawing by John Adams, you can start to see at the forward end of the magazine, we've got this hanging section. And this was the filling room. And John and his team recovered this, and it's on display at Chatham Dockyard. We can have a look. We can have a look at it. So this is the forward section. The junk store is in there, and this is the light room over here. But this is what John recovered, and this is where 10 minutes, right? This is where the gunpowder was transported from the barrels into cartridge cases, which were taken up to the gun decks. So it's very systematic. You've got to be very careful when dealing with gunpowder. So it was poured into a box. In the box, John found measuring jugs for decanting into these powder cartridges. Obviously, single charge goes into a powder, into one of these cartridge cases, and then you can put a lid on it and transport it up to the gun deck without spilling anything. Quickly, going to talk about innovation at this time, something that Anson brought in. And this is the evidence of some of the smallest artifacts on Invincible, and that is flintlocks. Invincible is one of the first ships to trial a cannon lock, and this is a more efficient and safer way of firing the guns and speeds up the rate of fire. Previously, they were using linstops, and this is a less efficient way, slightly more dangerous, especially if you were to drop this, if the gunner got injured. You would use this alongside a priming powder horn to fill the touch hole, get spilled gunpowder, drop this, it's got a slow match on it. You could have a fire, plus you've got to be reasonably close to the gun to use it. The gun lock takes that away, you've got a lanyard that's connected to a trigger, and you can stand safely back, look down the gun and aim and fire from a safe distance. It's almost instantaneous as well. So that's speeding things up. Let's look at the storage of shot and other weapons. And this is in the midship section around the mast. So you have a shot locker here, in front of the mast, and a shot locker behind the mast. What we found here is round shot only, 9-pounder and 24-pounder shots. Haven't found any 32, because this is probably at the bottom underneath all of that. You have the heavier shot. What we haven't found, which is a bit of a shame and I thought quite unusual, there's no bar shot or chain shot. But this may have been salvaged at the time. But it tells us that that bar shot and chain shot was probably stored higher up in the shot lockers. Now, a real unexpected find and a real surprise was finding swivel guns. And we found 6 cast iron swivel guns heavily concreted into all of this shot. It was so concreted that we couldn't recover them without deconcreting them underneath and chipping them out from all of these cannonballs. But this is what they look like. They're 3 feet long, cast iron, and they have a raw iron yoke. It's like the mounting where they would mount it high up on the ship, and that folds back from the trunnions along the barrel. It also had a wrought iron tiller, but that didn't survive when you're chipping it out. The tiller's obviously to direct the swivel gun. It's an anti-personnel weapon. You'd expect to find it up on the rails, and you'd use it at close quarters, taking people out on the opposing ship on the deck. Now, the fact that we're finding it in the holds is quite sensible. You know, you don't want these things up on the deck when you don't need them because they're going to rust in the weather. So they've stored them down below. So again, that's telling us something. The only thing we don't know at the moment is, because we haven't excavated the barrels of these swivel guns, whether they're loaded or not. But as Kay said, most guns found underwater are all loaded because you want to be ready as soon as you leave port. So the chances are that the swivels could be loaded. Ammunition for the swivel guns. We found in the form, or I think, we found this box outside the magazine, outside the break in the ship, and when we recovered it and opened it, excavated it at the labs, we found 8 compartments. In them was a combination of black sludge, same stuff that came out of the gunpowder barrels, lead shots, and pieces of yarn, string. So what we think is that they were carrying little bags of grape shots. Now, Invincible would have been issued with 70 boxes of grape shot. This grape shot wouldn't be for the big guns because you couldn't carry a box of grape shot for the big guns. So that's why I think they're for the swivels. So just to sum up, what did Anson try? How did he create invincibility? Well, first of all, he developed a fleet, or attempted to develop a fleet around a 74-gun ship. These are ships, a general purpose ship that could fight all around the world. They could carry lots of stores, stay at sea for long periods of time, and they were built to fight. They developed new technology. Technology doesn't change much, as Kay said yesterday, also from the Mary Rose up to the Victorian period. But the introduction of the cannon lock is one area where it does actually contribute to a faster, more efficient way of firing the guns. Gives you the edge over the enemy. And I think we see that at Trafalgar, and the French are still using the linstock. He also during his period as First Lord of the Admiralty, brought in, was experimenting with bigger guns on the upper gun deck. So that's why Invincible has got 24-pounder guns on the upper gun deck. It's a lighter 24-pounder gun. I don't think it was very successful though, but at least they're trying to experiment with different guns. And all the archaeological evidence of where it's stored on the ship and how it's clearly labelled shows a high level of organisation. I think a high level of organisation shows there's a high level of professionalism and discipline. Professionalism and discipline also gives you the edge over your enemy. And that is my conclusions to that, and I hope you enjoyed the talk. And I'd like to finish thanking, there's so many of you in this audience that have dived with me, and team from Bournemouth, and with the NAS, and all of your work, and John Bingham's team from the 80s have contributed to this. And Invincible, through such a thorough investigation, you actually get to learn about shipboard culture and new technologies, etc., through excavation.